Look up, tune in, the night is calling you. Planets, comets, moon and stars, there's always something new. From stargazing to science, we'll guide you through the sky. With the ALPO family, reaching higher, looking high. So grab your scope, your notes, your dreams, let curiosity unlock it. You're listening now to the one and only Observer's Notebook Podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Each episode, we share the latest discoveries, observing techniques, and stories from the people who explore the moon, planets, comets, and beyond. Whether you're looking through your backyard telescope or leading professional research, we are all united under one sky. I'm Tim Robertson, your host, and thank you for being here. Now, if you usually listen to the podcast in your car or on your phone, did you know you can now watch it too? That's right. The Observer's Notebook is now available in video right here on the ALPO YouTube channel. And here's another interesting fact. Over 70% of you who are watching it are not subscribed. So why don't you hit that little bell and hit that subscribe button, and that way you'll never miss another episode. It really helps our channel grow. The show is made possible from support of you, our listeners and viewers. To help keep the Observer's Notebook going, check out our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/observersnotebook. For just $1 a month, you're supporting the show. For $5, you get early access to the new episodes. For $10, you receive a copy of the Novice Observer's Handbook. And for $35 a month, you'll be listed as a producer on this podcast. And of course, to find out more about the ALPO, just go to www.alpo-astronomy.org. You can join the organization for as little as $22 every year. Let's get started with episode 239, and we're talking telescopes with Vic Maris of Stellarvue. Enjoy. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody back to this edition of the Observer's Notebook podcast. Today I ask a question. What makes a telescope truly exceptional? Is it the aperture? Is it the optics, the craftsmanship, or something more? In this time of technology, we're rapidly changing how we explore the night sky. From smart telescopes to AI-assisted imaging, what is the future of amateur astronomy really like? So today I'm excited to welcome Vic Maris, the founder of Stellarvue, a company well known for an amateur astronomy community for producing high-quality refractors and precision optical systems. Welcome to the podcast, Vic.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So why don't you just give everybody a bit of background about yourself before we get into the subject?
Okay. As a kid, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, a suburb of Los Angeles, and I was into monster magazines. There were I forget the guy's name now, but he had these monster magazines, and one of the magazines were open, and there was a guy in a spacesuit in the magazine. And this neighbor came over and visited us, and she looked at it and she goes, "Oh, are you interested in space?" And I went, "Yeah, I guess." She goes, "I have a book for you," and she walked out. She walked over to her house. She came back and she brought me the Golden Book of Astronomy, the 1951 or 52 version of this book with these wonderful illustrations and stuff. And she handed it to me, and I was kind of disappointed at first because I was expecting another monster magazine or something. But it got me interested, and I had it sitting there in my bedroom, and I started thumbing through it, and it got me. It just really got me. And then we were out playing ball out on the street like we always did back in the 50s, And one of the girls that was playing this ball game, she looked up and she goes, "Oh, look, a shooting star." And I looked up, and that was no shooting star. This was a bolide. This thing was enormous. In fact, it made the news. And I remember thinking it was like a giant moon on fire, and I could see the flames and stuff in my, mind's eye as a little kid. And that really kind of inspired me to get interested in astronomy. And so obviously, ask your parents for the telescope and end up with the quintessential 60 millimeter telescope. And that started the hobby going. And I've been inspired by the night sky ever since.
Wow. Now,
Yeah.
how did you get the bug to start building telescopes?
That's a really good question. I had the 60 millimeter telescope. It was a very bad 60 millimeter telescope,
I
by
think
the
they
way.
all were.
Yeah, well, I was in electronics class in junior high school, and I started talking to the kid across from me, and he was also into amateur astronomy, and he had a 60 millimeter telescope as well. And we started talking about astronomy, and and I said, "Yeah, I have a telescope, but it's not very good." Well, the kid next to me said, "Well, why don't you make one?" And I said, "You can do that?" And he said, "Yeah, in fact, you just get an Edmund catalog and a Jaegers catalog." And this was back at the
Hmm.
time when those two companies were in business. And he said, "I'll bring them to class tomorrow." So he did. And so I started looking through them and stuff. And of course, I assembled my first 4.25 inch reflector. And my parents went to visit their friends in Palm Desert, and it was a new moon weekend. And I
Mm.
brought my little 4 inch reflector. And I remember walking outside, looking up at a moonless sky in the desert and being completely lost. I
Yep.
mean, I had like 6 or 7 stars I could see in the San Fernando Valley. And now suddenly I was totally overwhelmed, but incredibly, inspired. So then from there, I decided I'm going to make my own mirror. And I did a 6 inch mirror using the kit from Edmund. And from there, I went on. I attempted a 5 inch refractor. That's a story all in itself. And then ended up in my early 20s. I guess I had made an 8 inch reflector, and then I made an 8 inch classical Cassegrain. And
Oh my.
yeah, um, that's where I stopped because at that point I'm 24 years old and I joined California State Parks. It was a lifelong dream of mine to be a park ranger.
Okay.
So I spent 30 years, my next 30 years, working for California State Parks and doing what I really loved out in the middle of nowhere. I love doing interpretation. I love giving campfire programs and nature walks, and particularly, of course, love doing star
Hmm.
talks for the public. And I'd take the 8 inch telescope that I had built, I'd stick it in the back of the bed of a dump truck, and I'd drive through the campground after we had posted all the announcements and brought it down. And that would bring everybody down to look through the telescope out in the desert park that I worked in. And it's just a wonderful thing to be able to share the night sky with people, to show them Saturn
Hmm.
for the first time. You get all kinds of reactions to that. I remember we were doing a star party locally here in Auburn, and at the Overlook. And I remember this woman walked up and she looked at Saturn through one of my refractors, and she goes, "No, no!" And she walked around and looked at the front of the telescope.
Yep.
And I said, "Ma'am, that you're looking at Saturn. That's really good." She goes, "No, no." She looked at me and she goes, "You should be ashamed of yourself." And she stormed off.
Hmm.
She was absolutely convinced that we were faking it.
Mm.
And for people who've never seen Saturn through a telescope, of course,
Right.
that's understandable. It's just so unreal,
Yeah.
just so unreal. So anyway, I spent a 30-year career in California state parks, and the thing I did that was a big mistake was I kept promoting and wound up as a faceless bureaucrat in Sacramento.
Mm.
The opposite of what I wanted, which was to be out in the field and with the public. I'm now, as I told one person, administering bureaucratic constipation, my job. So I decided to start teaching astronomy at the Learning Exchange in Sacramento
Okay.
because I missed that. So I started teaching this thing, and I ended up doing a living history thing where I dress up as Galileo at one point and just really got into it. And people would ask me, "Well, what telescope should we buy?" And I would give them advice. I generally tell them what not to buy. I had a long list of things not to buy.
Right.
And they said, "Well, you used to make telescopes. Why don't you start a telescope company?" And I remember my first reaction, the first time I was asked that, I said, "You've got to be crazy. Why would anybody start a telescope company?" And then as I got closer and closer to retirement, I started making prototypes in my garage. I started
Mm.
making telescopes again. And then I just got sucked right into it. And that was 28 years ago. And
Wow.
that we started Stellarvue, and it was labor of love,
Yeah.
because I had a retirement income. I could do whatever I wanted to. I didn't need to make a lot of money. And so I was creating the best telescopes I could at the time. And
Yeah.
we just kept getting better at it.
So what challenges did you have when you early on starting off a telescope company?
Well, not having enough money to buy the equipment that you
Okay.
needed was the biggest problem. And, we needed CNC machines. And,
Hmm.
I had homemade shop tools,
Yeah.
So we had to, slowly but surely get into that. I took out a lot of loans, and we ended up getting a contract with with a company that was making optics, actually making drones for the military.
Okay.
And that generated enough income for me making these drone lenses that we were able to get the most
Okay.
advanced test equipment. And that advanced test equipment, people think, well, you're using that to certify these optics are good. No. Well, we do that at the end, but what we use it for is to make these optics perfect and to
Hmm.
really work using a zygo laser interferometer, a phase shifting laser interferometer, and a double pack auto collimator to make sure everything is as good as it can be. And we just take a long time with each one of our objectives, and it really does make a difference.
Yeah, where did that come from? That drive for quality.
Well, I like to tell this story. Um, uh, when I started dating my wife, she was a school teacher, and I really wanted to show her this. She was cute. I really wanted to show her the stars, and I didn't have a telescope at that time. I mean, here I'm in the middle of my park career and everything. And she said, "Why don't you buy a telescope?" And I went, buy a telescope. But I didn't have the time, so I did. I bought a telescope. It wasn't, the optics weren't very good. I sent it back. Got another one. It still wasn't good. I sent it back. The third one I got, at least I could see an airy disc. So
Okay.
I gave up at that point and kept it. And we were up. This was when I was the ranger at Empire Mine State Historic Park. And we were up in the Sierra, and I had this 8-inch Schmidt. And I was looking at Saturn, and it was just like an average night. Saturn, you could see Cassini's division. It was kind of blurry,
Hmm.
like always. And somebody across the way said, "Oh, super seeing. We're under super seeing." And I went, "No, we're not." And he goes, "No, this is subarc second seeing. This is really pretty stunning." I said, "What size telescope are you using?" And he goes, "6-inch." I said, "Well, I have an 8-inch. This isn't super seeing." I said, "Who made your telescope?" And he said, "Roland Christian." I went, "Oh, it's an astrophysics refractor. Gee, I've never looked through one of those before." I said, "Well, let me take a look." So I took another look at Saturn through my telescope, fuzzy image, walked over, looked through the astrophysics. It was the closest thing I've ever seen to a Hubble image. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Hmm.
And I went back and looked through my telescope, and that was the last time I ever looked through that telescope.
My.
We had probably 3 dozen telescopes on the hill that night up in our local astronomy club and Sacramento Valley Astronomical Society. And we told everybody, this is subarc second seeing. Everybody point at Saturn. And so everybody pointed their telescopes at Saturn. And all of the commercial telescopes, you couldn't tell we were under perfect seeing condition. All the homemade telescopes, you couldn't tell we were under.
Wow.
Through that astrophysics refractor, you could see an incredible image of Saturn. And 3 other telescopes, they were reflectors. 2 had mirrors made by John Hall, who was a very good mirror maker
Right.
in his day before he passed away. And then there was a galaxy mirror that was in an obsession telescope. Those 4 telescopes were the only telescopes that could resolve subarc second seeing.
Okay.
And to all of us, that was very disappointing. I was very disappointed myself. But that told me. The other thing was that I wanted to start a refractor company as I got near the end of my retirement because every time I'd go to a star party, everybody's reflector was out of alignment. and it would never really show what they were capable of. I'd often go around and help people align their reflectors. So I wanted to make sure that it was going to be a sharp telescope. So I went with refractors that we started making refractors 28 years ago.
So going back 28 years ago, what has been the greatest evolution of Stellarvue telescopes from then to now?
The greatest evolution probably happened, it was probably 8 or 9 years ago. Um, I was walking through the shop, and Alex, my production manager, was looking at a test star that he was using to align the telescope. And he goes, "Wow." So I looked over and I go, "What?" And he goes, "Come and look at this." So I went and I looked, and it was a perfect airy disc, very little energy in the first ring, just absolutely perfect. And I went, "Wow, that is a really good optic." And he goes, "I have a confession to make." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "I've been working on this for 6 months. We have got to do this. We have got to make the best optics we can." I said, "You realize that's going to limit our market down to maybe 5% because these are going to take a lot of time. They're going to cost more money." And he said, "Yeah, but nobody's really, doing this actively. And we need to be doing this." And he talked me into it. And he's got as much a passion for quality as I do. And so that's when we switch from SV telescopes to SVX. We decided to add an X to the telescopes that we hand figure in our shop here,
Okay.
and that we make to the highest standard we can. Now, to give you an example, if you look through a commercial telescope with optics from China, your astigmatism, that aberration known as astigmatism, can be as bad as a quarter wave. And you can see that. You can see that as you look through a telescope. Our goal when we're hand figuring is to get the astigmatism down to like 0.01 or
Wow.
0.02. So we had one critic say that the problem with our telescopes is they're stupidly high accurate. And I took that as a compliment.
Yeah.
So,
what's wrong with that?
yeah. Well, and we've evolved. And the other thing I think the most important thing that we do here is we really believe in total quality management. When I worked for California State Parks, I actually did training for the superintendents, for the managers in total quality management, and looking at the data and using PDSA to do continual improvement. And so it's the continual improvement thing that we do. And when we switched from CCD to CMOS cameras, boy, they were very sensitive, very high resolution. We had to redo all of our optics. We had to redo how we hand figure, because we kept finding that if we did this or that, it could create artifacts with those sensitive cameras. And so we began this learning process where we were doing special techniques and how we treated the edge and such with our optics. And we loved this stuff. I mean, a lot of people would be very frustrated with this because it's going to cost time and money to do this. But we want to create as a perfect optics as we can. And so that's why we've been doing it. And it's been a continual learning curve as we go through this process. I think that's what's really good. And the other thing for us is, customer service. It's so important to be on the side of your customer, to be their advocate, because you don't get that a lot anymore in society. You get these huge corporations that own these companies, and you can't even communicate with anybody. When a customer has a problem with their telescope, we're on their side, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to help them with it. And even if they dropped a telescope that they bought from us 25 years ago, we'll figure out a way to help them. And, that's what we do.
Yeah.
And so when a customer is an imager, and I know a lot of your customers are visual people, which I am, and I really love that. I admire that. But it's very difficult to dial telescopes in for imaging. And we work with the customer. I mean, Alex will be hand figuring glass all day, and he will talk to 6 to 8 people a day, helping them dial in their systems,
Wow.
helping them to, figure out what the problem is. And it's generally like the filter. They'll buy cheap filters, or there'll be a reflection somewhere, or there'll be a spacer ring that's not quite square, and he'll work with them on that. And it's just doing what has been phrased as outrageous customer service. And I think that's real important because those are our ambassadors. We refer to our customers as members of the Stellar Crew. And that's a name that Bob MacArthur, a high school science teacher that works with us, loves to use. He loves to call them Stellar Crew members,
Okay.
and so it's kind of cool. It's kind of like we're on a starship. So it's kind of a cool thing to do. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
what you've been doing this now for 28 years. What
it's a
percentage
business. Yeah.
of a telescope manufacturing that you're doing today is craftsmanship or process that you've just refined your process to a point to where you don't need to have the hand figuring and things like that?
Well, we hand figure every one of our SVX
Okay.
optics. Yeah, we have to because the way when they come off the machine, they're not accurate enough,
Okay.
and so we hand figure those. We spend most of our time hand figuring.
Wow.
That's for each telescope we make, and it's interesting too because like the 102s take a lot of hand figuring. And I think we probably come very close to breaking even on those telescopes because they're the only 4-inch, hand-figured telescopes out there, and they're just time consuming
Hmm.
because of the size and everything else. It's just interesting. And of course, we've developed better optics, our reducer flatteners and flatteners for photography are now made for CMOS cameras specifically, and they're all made dedicated for the particular telescope they work with. We've moved away from selling Chinese generic flatteners and reducers, and we've had our lens designer, this guy's a genius. He's been doing it for 40 years, create these corrector optics just for these telescopes so that they're excellent, imaging scopes and they're durable. So, yeah, so that's been an interesting thing
Yeah.
going through that process.
How do you compete in a market that's flooded with low cost optics? So, right.
Oh, well, we're actually in cahoots with them. We don't mean to be. We've never signed a contract, but somebody will buy a cheap telescope, a cheap astrograph or whatever, and the market's really flooded with them, as you said, and it won't be aligned, or it'll go out of alignment, or they'll have some issue and stuff like that, and they get frustrated and they come to us finally, and so that's why our 102s are so popular because
Okay.
they're we work with the customer, get everything dialed in with them, and it's better than what they hope to get. Uh, there's there's a there's a big difference between there seems to be a big difference between reports that go out at the very beginning, the influencer reports, and what people report a year later on cloudy nights and other places in
Okay.
terms of how a certain telescope
Hmm.
or astrograph performs. We're in the process of developing a line of very durable astrographs, and there are a lot of steps that you have to go through to get these optics perfectly aligned and perfectly spaced, as there are variations in every lens that has to be compensated for if you really want to do it right, or if you want to create a handful of these and provide them to influencers for free and get good reviews and then mass produce the rest of them. I'm not saying that's what's happening. It's just that when you look at the body of evidence that's out there in the
Hmm.
astronomy world right now, and you see these incredible reports to begin with, and then you see what customers are saying about telescopes,
Hmm.
astrographs in particular, it's curious. It's an enigma you know. So we've held off on doing Petzvals, and we're just starting to dip our toe into it because we've had so many calls from people talking about how they go out of alignment, that type of thing. And we want to make sure whatever we create is durable. We've been working on this for 3 years.
Okay.
And I just think our refractors are so cool because they're absolutely perfect visual telescopes. You pop in the reducer flattener and boom, they're an astrograph,
Hmm.
and they're very durable. They're not going to go out of alignment. So,
Yeah, yeah. So in the last 3 or 4 years, the boon has been smart telescopes. Do you see those as an opportunity or a concern?
people, I'm not a good person to talk to ask questions about something. If I don't really know a lot about something, I don't really want to talk about it too much. But um, because I haven't made a study of it. But there are a lot of people, a lot of newbies in particular, that really like the fact that they can get a smart telescope, set it up, and have it do all of its stuff.
Hmm.
And so, that's so there's a place for that. There's a place for that, and there's an audience for that. Um, Smart telescopes. It's not the kind of thing that we would do. It's not in our wheelhouse. But somebody that wants to go and see an eclipse and wants to buy whatever
Hmm.
model this little sharp star telescope is, and set it up and have it and video the entire eclipse, you know, it's hard to fight against that.
Hmm.
Are they going to be as sharp as, as a premium refractor? No way.
Yeah.
They're not going to be anything like that. But it's a way to get started, maybe for some
Okay.
people. Um, yeah. So,
Okay. All right. So what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the world of amateur astronomy over the years?
well, I, when we first started, 95% of our customers were visual users. And now that's almost flipped.
Hmm.
Now, 28 years later, I'd say 85% of our customers are imagers. And so there's been a big move to get into astroimaging, which is not easy. It's difficult.
Hmm.
They make it look, the imagers, we got some fantastic imagers out there that just do an
Yeah.
excellent job, but they've spent decades doing this stuff. And so it's a long learning curve.
Hmm.
I usually tell newbies, people that are just getting into it, start with binoculars. It's the
Hmm.
standard.
Hmm.
It's the standard advice you give people. Start with binoculars, learn the night sky, learn the constellations, savor the experience. Because people are always in a hurry. They're always in a rush to get from here to there. And they don't realize it's the journey that really matters. It's that experience of
That's
learning
true.
and
So true.
having the universe, show itself to you. So start with binoculars and then, get yourself a telescope. Pick the right telescope, and, go from there. And if you want to get into imaging, I usually say use your telescope visually for a year and then get into imaging. Learn the night sky, appreciate it,
Hmm.
and then slowly but surely get into imaging because it can be very frustrating. When we first started doing our star parties at a place called Likely Place up in the northeast corner of California, which has the darkest sky in California, I mean, it's just stunning. Um, the first few years, we had new imagers. And there's also, even though this is in the middle of nowhere, there's an 18-hole golf course there. So these guys would come with their golf clubs and they'd spend all day cussing their heads off at where the ball didn't go. And
Right.
then at night, they'd be frustrated with their imaging system because it wasn't dialed in and they would cuss their heads off. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting back there with my 6-inch refractor, just enjoying the night sky. I'd be looking at, the Pleiades, and I'd see all these little whirlpools and things that I couldn't see from the city, but here they were,
Right.
just
Right.
stunning view. And I'm just having a pastoral experience, and these guys are, but all of those guys have evolved. They've gotten to the point where they're not doing that anymore. They're really finally enjoying the hobby. So I like to kind of let people know that it's a process that you have to go through, and don't just be aware of it. That, you want to take it. And to me, take it over time. Don't frustrate yourself,
Yeah, those guys are probably still cussing their heads off on the golf course though too. So,
Oh, well, of course. But I guess I'm
what
not a
about the
golfer.
impact of social media on amateur astronomy? YouTube and AI. What any comments on that?
Well, um, I'm just wondering if you should ask an old guy who was a history major about the future. Um, because you talk about future trends in astronomy.
Hmm.
I think we're gonna continue to see a shift from, visual use to imaging. We're gonna see more smart telescopes. We're gonna see more new uses of, AI to further disengage our brains, and so that we can, continue to move like lemmings into a dystopian future.
Thank you for that. Okay. Um,
Sorry, that was meant to be a little tongue in cheek,
no,
but
I know, I know. I took it that way.
so okay, good. So we're gonna the thing that an old telescope guy like myself
Mhm.
gets really frustrated when new people don't really know anything and they don't want to know anything. They just want to plug and play.
Hmm.
And you know, it's part of the experience is to kind of go beyond that because they're gonna want to, if they really get into it, they're gonna want to get a telescope that's
Yeah.
actually sharp. They're
Right.
gonna want a telescope that's gonna really give them what they want. I was at the Winter Star Party a few months ago, and somebody said, "Well, I can get software now that'll fix all of the problems around the edges and do all this stuff." And I said, well, then good. If that's what you want to do, you can buy a cheaper telescope, you can use software, and you can make pretty pictures. But it's not going to be science. It's not going to be
Right.
data.
Right.
It's going to be fake.
Hmm.
And so if that's what you want to do, that's great. I don't want to criticize that. I want to be open to everybody's got a different requirement or
Right.
a need. But it's a lot different than really seeing what's there. And so there's that part of it.
Now, do you think visual astronomy will ever make a comeback?
Oh, well, I think it's here. I
Yeah.
mean, we just sold, I would say that half of the 180 refractors that we've sold, and these are our premier, these are $25,000 telescopes that are the sharpest telescopes we've ever made. They have dual fluorophosphate elements. They're sharp in blue, green, and red. I mean, they're just incredible telescopes. And over the past, I think the last 20 we've sold, half of them have been for visual people. So I think there's still a great desire for people to view the sky visually through a telescope that's incredibly sharp. It's going to be different than it is through a cheaper telescope. And so I think it'll always be there.
Okay.
But I think that, I think there's a difference between imagers and visual people.
Yeah.
you know. But there's overlap. There's a lot of overlap. I mean, we have a lot of people that buy our telescopes that want to be able to do both.
Hmm.
And a lot of imagers don't ever look through their telescope, and I tell them, you're really missing out. You really ought to put an eyepiece in and look at Jupiter. You really ought to,
Yeah. I agree.
So, it's that kind of thing.
That's
So,
true.
yeah.
So, what advice would you give somebody starting out in astronomy today?
Avoid beginner mistakes. Let's see. Okay. So never go to a website that says the best of or the top 5 or the top 10. You're always going to get bad advice. You're always going to be shown cheap telescopes that really don't work very well. There's a lot of hype on the internet that isn't going to help you.
Hmm.
Don't base your decision solely on what you hear influencers say. Like I said, wait a year. look at what the people are saying about the telescopes they actually bought, the
Yeah.
production models that they actually bought. So that's I think kind of important. I'm not dissing influencers here. I think these guys really try to do a good job of showing people what they got and what they see. I think they're honest. I think it's just that, are these cherry picked telescopes or not?
Okay.
And so don't just go by the influencers. Go and do your research. Use critical thinking, when you're trying to determine what you want. And do yourself a huge favor. If you're going to buy a cheap telescope, just don't. It's just it's not gonna help you at all, so you
Yeah.
don't want to do that. And then, what are you going to use the telescope for?
Right.
I mean, I had a guy that called me and he goes, yeah, so I really wanted a 12-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain. I really wanted one. And I said, okay. And he goes, yeah, but I go out and I observe alone. And he's, 68 years old. So he drives out, he gets his telescope, he's all excited. He drives out, he sets the mount up, he tries to lift the telescope up and he can't.
Yep.
Probably, he chose poorly. He chose poorly. So you've got to think about it, because a telescope that's easy to use is the one you're going to probably use the most.
That's
so
right.
You have to think a little bit about that. You want to make sure that I tell people, for example, okay, what are you doing with the telescope? And somebody will say, well, I'm going to be using it exclusively to study galaxies. I said, oh, you're going to study galaxies. Oh, what are you thinking of buying? Oh, I'm going to buy a 3-inch refractor. No, you're not. Yeah, that's not the right telescope for the job,
Right.
So you want to pick, the telescope that really will do what you want it to do. And one way of doing it is to go to astronomy.tools on the internet and, look at what things are going to look like through a given telescope, because you can put in they have a field of view, an FOV page, where you can put in the telescope and the eyepiece and whatever, or the camera, and you can see the field of view and what it's going to show. And that's going to help you. That'll help a lot of people. I mean, a lot of colleges and stuff think they got to buy a big reflector for anything that they do. But if they're looking for wide field, they probably should buy a refractor.
Yeah.
Like one of our 7-inch refractors, because number one, it's going to be maintenance free. That's going to save them a lot of money and a lot of hassle. It's going to work all the time. And, and number two, it's going to be stunning in terms of the amount of detail and stuff they can get at that image scale. But if they're going to want to look at distant galaxies, well, you don't want a refractor for that. You want a big reflector. So you have to make decisions that are logical, and understanding what you're looking for. That's real important. So,
yeah. So
I mean, go ahead.
If you were starting your company over today, what would you do differently?
I would, these are really good questions. I'm going to think of really good answers in about 2 hours. But, I think I would have gone quicker to do our hand figuring. I would have gone for really, spending, because we wasted a lot of time on Chinese optics. And and we did a lot of returns, and it was a hassle. I mean, and it was very expensive. There were a lot of very expensive mistakes. I learned a lot about glass types, what glass types to use and not to use. We learned a lot about hand figuring and polishing, and developed that technique. So it's been really an adventure. And I've got a small staff here of people that are really dedicated, and, they get paid a living wage. I mean, I like to think of myself as Ernest Obb, the head of Zeiss, because he professionalized his organization, and he gave people a living wage back in the 1800s, and he was the guy that invented the apochromat, so he was the one that was able to make a color-free refractor. So it was, uh, it's yeah, it's been such a cool thing to have two goals in my life. One was to be a park ranger and live out in the wild, and the other was to really get into amateur astronomy.
Wow.
I remember as a kid, I grew up at a time when you couldn't just open your phone and look things up.
Hmm.
There wasn't any internet. And, when you had to learn something or research something, you'd go to the library. So I remember my mother bought us the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is a big deal. And she swore us all to secrecy. We couldn't tell dad, but we got the Encyclopedia Britannica. And I remember looking up all the astronomy things in it,
Uh-huh.
look at the cosmology section and
Yep.
stuff like that. It was really good. And they mentioned ALPO in that in the Encyclopedia Britannica about when they
Yeah.
were talking about planetary research and
Yeah.
does Mars have canals and all of that stuff.
Hmm.
ALPO was in there, which is kind
Oh
of
yeah.
cool,
Oh yeah.
which is kind of cool. So
Yeah.
the organization has been around a long time, and it's one of the reasons why I feel kind of honored actually having the opportunity to talk with you here, Tim, on this thing because I think it's such a great thing that you're doing,
Hmm.
and because you know people who are just getting started and really like to view the planets and the moon and the sun and that type of thing, this organization, I think, is a great opportunity for them because they can not only learn and develop and hone their skills
Hmm.
uh, with people that are like-minded,
Hmm.
but they can also contribute to science,
Yeah.
which is huge.
Yeah.
I wish I could have done that when I was a kid.
Yeah. And we recently changed the tagline for the Alpa to from stargazing to science because
Nice.
that's really what we promote. I mean, everybody started off looking at the moon. Everybody started off looking at the planets. No one
Hmm.
started off
Yeah.
looking at M31. Everyone was
No.
looking at the moon and the planets.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and now I go on the internet and I see all these gorgeous images of Jupiter and Saturn, and I'll send a note to the person that posted it. I said, "Are you a member of the Oppo?" No, never heard of it. Well, this image, what do you do with it besides posting on Facebook? Nothing.
Yeah.
There's science in that image,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Sure.
we can pull that science out and promote it too. So that's where we are as an organization. I want to ask you real quick. You mentioned Saturn as one of your go-to objects. What is your favorite other than Saturn? That's a easy answer. What's one of your favorite objects to look at through one of your telescopes?
Oh, Jupiter.
Jupiter. Okay.
I love Jupiter. I mean, it's all ever changing.
Hmm.
Through our refractors, the satellites are disks and the festoons they just jump out at you. We had our 180 at the Winter Star Party, and uh, we were looking at different planets. We were looking at Jupiter, and then Mike Lockwood, who is an exceptional mirror maker, had an 18-inch reflector that he made. And so we located it. It wasn't too far away from us. So we looked at Jupiter through the 180, the 7-inch refractor, and through the 18-inch reflector. And it was much brighter through the 18-inch
Hmm.
reflector, of course. But every bit of festoon detail that we could see in our 7-inch refractor, we could see in the Lockwood reflector. That's a high bar because the Lockwood mirrors are
Hmm.
stunning.
Yeah.
He and I both believe that astigmatism is bad, and so I really believe I'm to the point where I can look through a reflector and tell you if it's a Lockwood mirror or not. I mean,
Wow.
he's
Wow.
that good, he's very good. So, and we get into these debates over contrast, Uh, One of the things, the advantages to a refractor is that it has no central obstruction. So it's going to have the highest contrast. It doesn't have light bouncing back and forth, and it's fully baffled. So it is going to be the most contrasty refractor.
Hmm.
I had a 16-inch reflector at the Dark Sky Star Party, and it was so bad that you could barely split Epsilon Lyrae, which is a very wide double,
Hmm.
and 2 point some arc second, and you'd hardly split it. It was a bad mirror, and it was a Chinese mirror. So um, you look through that, and you look through, and at that time I had a 6-inch refractor Stellarvue refractor, and there was no comparison in the amount of detail and the contrast. It was just wonderful and stuff. But when people say reflectors have bad contrast compared to refractors, they're mostly talking about bad reflectors versus, because the contrast through the Lockwood mirror, for example, I had this 16-inch, and just acquired this Chinese mirror. I actually ordered from Mike a 16-inch mirror and replaced it with that one. And it was night and day. I mean, the contrast was very good. So, so the most important thing was the accuracy of the optic and how it's built, how it's mounted, and all the other things, and how well aligned it is, that type of thing. So, how did I get off on this tangent? Did I just go flying away somewhere?
You did, but that's fine. I've talked to you at length before. I
was going to make a point, and I have no idea what that point was now at this point.
Oh, your favorite object. That's what I was asking.
I've been out too late. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, Jupiter. Thank you. Back to it. So, I mean, it is absolutely amazing looking at Jupiter. And, it's wonderful during opposition, because if you've got steady air around you and you see it rise during the opposition, you can see the entire planet in 10 hours, 9 hours and 55 minutes for it to completely go around once. And you see all sides of Jupiter, at once. As a kid, it was Mars. I was just obsessed with Mars. This was before the spacecraft went to Mars and showed us that it looked like the moon. Yeah. We still had the possibility of canals back then.
Right.
And I proved that canals were real, because I was looking at Mars through my 6-inch reflector that I had made, and I could see canals, and I drew where the canals are. And then I had an idea. Hey, my brother-in-law is here. He's never looked through a telescope before. He's never seen a thing. So I drew the major features, and I left the canals off, and I handed it to him. And I said, Gene, there's canals here. Show me where they are. And he put the canals in the exact same place. So that, to me, proved there were canals. Now, of course, there was a debate between Slipher and Lowell. Slipher took ball bearings, put them in the distance, and he was sketching all kinds of lines that he thought he saw, but he knew wasn't there. And of course, Lowell disagreed with him. And Slipher was right. I mean, they were optical illusions. And so, I mean, I grew up at a time when there were canals on Mars, when there was the possibility of all kinds of life on Mars, and that was magical. And so, damn it, science came in. But anyway, you got to retain that magic, even though maybe it's not going to be, little green men on Mars. So
this is great. Yeah. Where can our viewers learn more about Stellarvue?
Stellarvue, you can go to my website, stellarvue.com. You have to remember Stellarvue ends VUE. We couldn't get VIEW, so it's Stellarvue and VUE.com. Huh? That makes it unique. Well, I would rather have the common spelling, but anyway. And then if you go to that and you go to the video page, which I think I have to look up exactly where that is. We have a number of videos where we can show you the process and stuff. And then if you have any questions, you can call us, because we're human beings and we actually answer our phone and talk to you. So it's kind of a weird concept. I know.
Wow, that's bizarre.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, cool. Well, Vic, this has been fun. I enjoyed having you on the podcast today.
Thank you. If you ever want to see me lose my mind again and go off on a tangent, just give me a call.
We'll do that. We'll have you back. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
All right,
Jess. Great talking to you.
Yeah. Take care.
All right.
All right. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Observer's Notebook podcast. I again want to thank Vic Maris for coming on today and telling us all about Stellarvue and his view of astronomy today. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment and give it a thumbs up and subscribe and share the podcast. It really helps reach more listeners. New episodes of the Observer's Notebook are released on the 1st and 15th of every month. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, the ALPO YouTube channel. If you'd like to help support the podcast, you can do so through Patreon for as few dollars a month, up to $35 a month, where you'll receive exclusive benefits, including 1-year membership to the ALPO and producer credits. on the podcast. A special thank you goes out to our producers of this podcast, Steve Seedentop and Michael Moyer, for their continued generous support. If you'd like to reach me, you can email me at tim.robertson@alpo-astronomy.org. That's all for now. See you next time. You can join the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers today. It's just this easy. You can become a valuable member of this International Lunar and Planetary Astronomy Organization, founded in 1947 by Walter H. Haas. It's based upon the structure of the British Astronomical Association. You can join various lunar and planetary observing sections, contribute to our massive archive of observations. You'll have access to our extensive lunar and planetary gallery of over 20,000 photos and observations of the sun, the moon, comets, meteors, and the planets. You'll receive our quarterly publication, the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. You'll have the ability to join the ALPO training program, which will teach you the finer points of making planetary observations. You can attend our annual virtual conference, and you'll have access to the Observer's Notebook podcast. Membership begins at only $22 a year. The way to find us, just go to your Google and type in ALPO Astronomy, and you'll see this prompt come up. There's our association with our website, alpo-astronomy.org, and you'll come to our homepage. If you look at the top of the homepage, it says Join ALPO. Click on that, and you'll come to the sign-up screen. Gives you the information on the organization, and there's two ways to join. You can join by mail, where you will download a membership form, or you can pay online using PayPal. This is the PayPal processing page. You just fill out a few information lines, and then you're given the chance to click PayPal and join the association. Welcome to the ALPO.